And good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for May 25th, 2011. First item on the agenda is consideration of minutes for our regular meeting of April 27, 2011. Those minutes were included with our agenda materials. Are there any revisions to those minutes? If not, then those minutes will stand approved as presented. We'll move on to new business. Our first item is a variance request. It is application Z 11027 by Mr. Matt Millsap of Building Company Number 7 for Ms. Leah Hewlin, requesting a 37.4-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along West Lytle Street for accessory structures in a commercial highway zone. And this is for property located at 611 West College Street. Regarding the same property, the applicant is also requesting a 3.8-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along West College Street for accessory structures. Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application for us, please.
All right, thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. As you mentioned, the subject property is located at 611 West College Street, which is located at the intersection of College and Lytle, just to the east of Northwest Broad Street. And I'll show you an aerial photograph here. Here's the subject property here. As you can tell, it fronts on College, and then Lytle goes to the west and intersects with Broad Street, just south of Old Fort Parkway and Memorial Boulevard. This building right here is the new location of Grumpy's Bail Bonds. About a month ago, Ms. Hewlin's contractor, Mr. Millsap, began constructing an outdoor deck on the rear of that existing building, kind of in this area right here, without first having obtained a building permit. Mr. Millsap was instructed by the Building and Codes Department to come to City Hall and get a building permit for that deck. When he came to the Planning Department, he was advised that it appeared that the deck was being constructed in the front setback of West Lytle Street. The property is zoned CH, and there's a 42-foot front setback along all front property lines. And so if we can go back to the aerial photograph, since it's a corner lot, it actually has two front property lines, one along West College Street and one along West Lytle Street. So basically the entire lot, and when I put up the survey of the property, you'll be able to tell the entire lot is encumbered by that 42-foot front setback. There's literally nowhere any structure could be built that was not in violation of either the 42-foot front setback along College or the 42-foot front setback along Lytle. You can see here's the survey of the property with the deck shown as it has been constructed thus far. The deck has not been completed. The Building and Codes Department put a stop work order on the construction of the deck. So the platform of the deck has been constructed, as have the posts, but the railing has not been put on it, has not been constructed to complete it. And you can see the deck at its current location is 4.6 feet off of the West Lytle Street right-of-way. And that is and keeping it in the same location would require the 37.4-foot variance of that 42-foot front setback along West Lytle Street. The applicant is also requesting a 3.8-foot variance off of, or from the 42-foot front setback along College, because despite the fact that it is actually to the rear of the existing building, it is not, the deck is not even 42 feet off of the West College Street front property line. And so that's, as a result, they're requesting the 3.8-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along West College Street. You'll notice on the survey, it's the current owner is listed as Richard Harvey. I wanted to clear up any confusion. Spoken with Ms. Yulin, and she is in the process of purchasing the property right now. She has informed me that she has a lease purchase agreement currently in place for that property. So the owner listed actually holds the mortgage and just as a bank would for a traditional property owner. So I just wanted to clarify that she has clarified that for us, and she is the current owner of the property. Now I'll show you some photographs of the site. This is the front of the building. You can see the parking is in front, backing directly out onto College. This shows that intersection of College and Lytle. This kind of gives you perspective of how close the deck is to the front property line along West Lytle Street. Here's the deck as it has sat for about the last month. This is looking back east on West Lytle Street. You can see the edge of the deck there. It's from across Lytle Street. Sometimes I get a little picture happy. Took a lot of pictures of the deck. And this is just another view looking south. The applicant has informed staff that the deck is going to be used as kind of a break area for the employees, and he has informed me that at no time do they intend to cover it or put a roof over it. It will simply be an open deck. The applicant has indicated his justification for the variance in an attempt to meet the standards and proof required in Section 10 of the zoning ordinance. His primary justification is because of the size and shape of the lot and of the existing non-conforming structure, as many structures in that area are also non-conforming. Staff is not aware of when the size and shape of this lot was created. You can see the front property line along Lytle kind of follows the curvature of Lytle, and it's at its widest point. The lot is along at the intersection with College, and then it kind of narrows back as you head back towards Broad Street. The existing building was built in 1940. On a side note, considering the visibility of the deck and its proximity to West Lytle Street, the board may wish to discuss whether or not it would be appropriate to require that it be painted to match the existing or the color of the existing building so that the deck doesn't stand out so much. If the board approves these variance requests, staff recommends the following conditions. Required permits must be obtained from the Building and Codes Department prior to doing any further work on the deck. And number two, prior to the issuance of permits, any proposed site improvements must first receive site plan approval, as is required of any commercial expansion like this. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Millsap and Ms. Yulin are both available if you have any questions for them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Mr. Millsap, Ms. Yulin, anything you'd like to add to the application? I tell you what, if you want to add something, if you could come to the podium so we can catch you on the mic.
If we are required to paint it, we'd ask that we be allowed 6 months for the wood, for that pressure-treated wood to fully cure out so that the paint application will stick and we can get a good paint on it.
Okay.
And we'd also like to suggest, instead of matching the color of the building, that we would paint it white to match the trim of the building if we are in fact required to paint it.
And you're Mr. Millsap?
Yes, yes, sir.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Millsap? All right. Thank you, sir. At this time, then, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I'd like to have a question for Matthew. Matthew, has anybody in staff, staff expressed any safety concerns about the relative proximity of this corner of the deck to the sidewalk?
Not with regards to the sidewalk. At our review meeting, our city traffic engineer, Mr. Balachandra, was present, and he reviewed the site plan to see if there were any traffic sight distance issues with the structure being so close to the right-of-way, and he indicated that there were no traffic sight distance issues associated with this.
Okay, thank you.
What is the signage allotment on this property?
I don't know. That's Mr. Ives may.
Somebody will look into that, check that. Seems a bit much just from looking at the photographs, but I don't know what size signs are appropriate.
Okay.
Or what the limits are.
Okay. Ms. Yellen, you might want to add something.
The sign company pulled a permit for all the signs, and we were inspected, and we've passed.
Okay.
Good.
I think there's a difference between the permanent signs, which for that size building, I think we had a little extra because we had two road frontages, and but then we also, in the city of Murfreesboro, they allow you non-permanent signage. So we also, some of those signs you saw were permanent, but some were banners.
Okay, thank you.
And the deck itself is going to remain flat. It's not, you said it wasn't coming up with a roof or anything. It's going to remain the way it is right now.
That's correct.
That's what you understand?
He indicated to me that there were no intentions of roofing that. And in my opinion, if they ever did want to roof that, it would require coming back to the Board of Zoning Appeals, because that would be different than what was represented to the board at today's meeting.
It'll be different side issues. I mean, yeah.
In the traffic studies that you guys did, you were looking mainly sight lines and not the safety of somebody sitting on the corner of that deck in that nearest part. Is that right? All you're looking at sight lines, be able to see?
Correct.
What you're addressing? Okay.
There's no limitation, I'm assuming, with respects to the amount of variance that someone can ask for with respects to any front setback?
That's correct.
Okay.
Technically, they could ask for a full 42-foot variance if they wanted to.
Okay.
And the building itself is grandfathered in.
That's correct. It was built in 1940, and it is 6.9 feet off the Lytle Street right-of-way.
Couldn't build anything on this property, could you? Because it's the 42-foot setbacks from both streets combined to make to create where there's no building envelope whatsoever.
That's correct. If you look at the survey, you'll notice how the 42-foot minimum building setback line along Lytle is here, and along College is here, meaning that anywhere in this area is actually in the front setback. So yet no structures, no additions, no accessory structures, nothing could be built on this property without a permit, or without a variance, excuse me.
This isn't in the Manning Avenue corridor, is it?
No.
The site plan approval is staff. I didn't.
It would be an administrative site plan review.
Well, it's all close to Lytle. I mean, you know, it's the obvious thing. It just right there. But I don't know how you put anything on the building without violating the setback in some way. And I don't know how you put a deck on there without being close to the street of some kind.
It's certainly one of those lots that would need a variance for something, but how much is?
It definitely
much do you
qualifies
want?
for odd shape and no other options and things like that. I guess my biggest thought is just, I mean, I drove past it. I mean, it's just right there seems like it's just right on the street, right there, that corner. But to be honest, I guess it's maybe a foot closer than the corner of the building actually is right here already. So maybe a foot and a half.
I hope it's just not a lot of traffic on that street, is it? I mean, who knows?
I think it acts as a little bit of a cut-through from the downtown area to Broad Street.
Is there a railing on any of this? Is there a railing around it? It's not, is it?
No. A railing as far as along the deck?
Yeah.
There will be. They began work without a permit, and that's
That's what I'm trying to wonder before, because right now it's just flat.
Right. Yeah, they began work without a permit. Our Building and Codes Department noticed the work occurring without a permit, and they put a stop work order on it until they got the permit. When they came in for the permit, they were made aware of the setback issues, and so they couldn't get a permit until they get the setback issues resolved.
But the design of the deck would include a railing around it on that corner?
Yes.
That'd be good, at least it couldn't fall off over into the street. Getting around.
And one thing that you do have at your disposal is that you can the maximum variance that can be approved is what's been advertised. A lesser variance can be approved without re-advertising. So if you did feel that some amount of relief was appropriate, but not the full amount of what they've requested, the number can shrink. It just can't go up.
I mean, if Mr. Balachandra has looked at this and there's not a safety issue, I'm not sure what grounds we would have to deny the variance, so I'm going to make a motion that we approve the variance.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is that subject to staff comments?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Bromley?
Just, if I may, Chairman Rogers, is the board okay with the way it's the current aesthetic of it, or do they want to talk about possibility of painting it to make it maybe not stick out so much? Just curious to get your thoughts on that.
I've had painted decks in the past, and they become a maintenance issue, and I think at times if it's something's not, I guess that could be anything that's not maintained, it could be worse of an eyesore than the fact that it's a wood deck versus matching the trim, but that's just my opinion.
I think it looks okay how it is.
And the reality is you got two huge neon pink signs in the back of the building already. I don't think you're going for aesthetics up here. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that application has been granted. Thank you.
Oh, and then actually, I didn't mention this, but there were 2 variance requests.
Oh, okay.
So each one will need to be taken in a separate motion.
Okay.
One did we just take?
My motion would be pertaining to the 37.4-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot setback along West Lytle Street.
Okay, so that application, that component of the application has been approved. We'll then consider the request for the 3.8-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along West College.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the 3.8-foot variance and taking into consideration the comments by the staff.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now the application's been granted. Thank you. All right, we'll move now to application Z11028 by Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC for Murfreesboro Medical Properties, requesting a 10-foot variance from the minimum required 10-foot separation between buildings and parking in the Gateway Design Overlay District. And this is for property located at 1272 Garrison Drive. Regarding the same property, the applicant is also requesting a variance to the requirement that each sub-parking lot in a development within the Gateway Design Overlay District shall consist of no more than 200 parking spaces. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Subject property at 1272 Garrison Drive, many of you are familiar with. It's the new location of the Murfreesboro Medical Clinic. Phase 1 was completed a year or 2 ago, and now Murfreesboro Medical Clinic is wanting to move forward with construction of Phase 2. They have been to the Planning Commission for initial design review, as this is located in the Gateway Design Overlay District, and the initial design review has been approved. There were 2 variances, as Chairman Rogers read them a moment ago, pertaining to the development plan for this property that the developer needed. And prior to going before the Planning Commission once again for final design review and site plan approval, the Planning Commission did not see any issues with the 2 variance requests and prompted the applicant to go ahead and make application for those variance requests to the Board of Zoning Appeals. First, I'll orient you a little bit to the subject property. As you can see, here is the existing Murfreesboro Medical Clinic with parking out front and parking to the north. Garrison Drive runs from Gateway Boulevard to West College Street, and you'll recognize this. This is the Gateway Island Reception Center here with the walking trail around it. So the Murfreesboro Medical Clinic is just to the west of the city's Gateway Island. This is the master plan for the property. The first request that I'll go over with you is the one pertaining to the number of parking spaces in a sub parking area. Our Gateway Design Overlay District regulations require that in a large development like this, that the parking lot be kind of made into sub parking areas of no more than 200 parking spaces. There are already about 190 or so parking spaces in this existing sub-parking area here at the north side of the property. In this existing parking lot, only on the westernmost aisle, only has parking on one side of that aisle. And in going through the development plans with staff and with the Planning Commission, it was determined that it really didn't make much sense, and it wasn't good design to go ahead and just not put parking spaces on the other side of this aisle, just in order to keep that sub-parking area under 200 spaces. It was a wasted use of land and not a very good, efficient use of the property in order to maximize the number of parking spaces on that property. So the applicant has proposed parking spaces along the other side of that existing driveway aisle, which would bump up the number of parking spaces in that sub-parking area to 227. So for that sub-parking area, he is requesting a variance to the requirement that it consist of no more than 200 parking spaces. All the other sub-parking areas in the development will meet the maximum 200 space requirement. In addition, as we've seen in many of the developments in the Gateway, there is a need for a loading dock, a loading area directly adjacent to the building. And our zoning regulations call for a 10-foot separation in between the building and the parking area. Well, in this case, the parking area abuts directly up to the building where the loading dock is. It's very similar to the situation with the Polaris Hospital that is under construction on North Thompson Lane, just south of Wilkinson Pike. With a facility like this, there is a great need for frequent delivery of supplies, and to require the delivery trucks to pull up 10 feet away from the building, have the delivery workers unload those items down, and then go up to the loading dock after walking 10 feet just simply doesn't make much practical sense. So just for the area around the proposed loading dock, he has requested a 10-foot variance from that minimum required 10-foot separation between the buildings and the parking. And as we've seen in many instances, there are certain functional needs of various commercial buildings that require a variance from that requirement. The applicant has provided justification for his variance requests in his application materials. Mr. Taylor is here also if you have any questions for him about either one of these variances. If the board approves these variance requests, staff recommends the following condition. The Planning Commission must grant final design review and site plan approval for the proposed development. Mr. Taylor is in attendance if you have any questions for him, and I'll be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley?
Oh, and I do have some photographs if you'd like to see them.
Okay.
This is the parking lot aisle in question, looking south down the parking lot. What they're proposing to do, rather than just keeping parking on just this side of the aisle, there will be parking spaces here where this landscaping is right now as well. And this is just the front of the existing building. And you'll find that for your reference, I've included the architectural elevations that have been before the Planning Commission as well.
Mr. Blomley, I have a curiosity question. Why does a sub-parking lot have a 200 space maximum? Just you don't want this vast parking area is the thought process, or?
Yeah, I think the thought process of that is when we were looking at our gateway regulations, and you see examples of other parking lots around town that are basically seas of asphalt, not broken up by any major areas of landscaping. And I think what we're trying to do is break that up, have sub parking lots with landscape areas in between the sub parking lots, so that it's not just this big sea of asphalt.
Makes sense.
I have a question, too, that is probably more of a curiosity, but did this come before us before? Does the turnaround there or the drop-off area in the front not fall within the waiver of the 10-foot? Did we ever look at this before? There's like an area where you pull up to the door and drop. There's like a turn-through, like we have at churches, and with the awning over it.
For the existing building?
Yeah, for the existing building. I'm just curious why that didn't. I don't remember hearing that. Maybe we did, and I just wondered why that.
I think they're actually because of the not taking into account the canopy, but just the building itself. I think they're actually probably maintaining 10 feet from the front wall of the building outside into the sidewalk before you get to the actual parking area. But Mr. Taylor may be able to address that.
Guess what he's going to tell me?
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing, and it's the same way in this new phase as well. We're maintaining the actual driving distance to the building that's required. We're not counting the canopy itself as part of the building, I guess.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for either Mr. Taylor or Mr. Blumley? If not, then we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion. Again, we have two separate components to this application, and I think probably consider the 10-foot variance from the minimum required 10-foot separation between buildings and parking. We'll consider that first.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion or questions, I'd move for approval of the 10-foot variance on the separation between buildings and parking, subject to staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, move on now to the request for a variance to the requirement that each sub-parking lot in the development shall consist of no more than 200 parking spaces.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance, subject to the staff comment.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Blumley, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I understand it. All they're doing is adding a row of parking on the other side there where you showed us that picture. There's no expanding it on the other side for parking, or just adding that row on the opposite?
They're actually building out quite a, phase two will include a number of additional parking spaces. Let me put the master plan back on there.
But this this motion just modifies that one parking area,
That's correct.
and the rest of it's going to be reviewed through planning as far as the new phase and all that.
Right.
We're not being-
They're basically building out the rest of the vacant land on there with additional parking, but this particular sub-parking area is the only one that will consist of more than 200 spaces. All others will comply.
Or is there still going to be a buffer between this one and the new one? Is that,
Yes, yes, there will be.
which makes it a separate sub-parking area?
Correct.
Okay. I'm good with that. Sorry.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on that aspect of this application. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Taylor, Mr. P., that application has been granted. Thank you. All right, we'll now move on to special use permits and variance requests. First item there is application Z 11029 by Mr. Jake Lloyd for Mid-America Distributors, requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment, which would be a seasonal fireworks retailer, in a commercial highway zone. This is for property located at 2437 Old Fort Parkway. The applicant is also requesting a variance to the requirement that the parking spaces displaced by a temporary vendor on the site of an existing permanent business will not total more than 25% of the total parking available on site. Mr. Baum, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. This is a new site that we've never had before us for a seasonal fireworks retailer. Just a little bit of history. Mr. Lloyd had made application to the board for last month for one that he had approved for the last 2 years, which would be on the Cason Lane side of the Kroger Shopping Center, close to where the old Ritter's Frozen Custard used to be. Well, Ritter's Frozen Custard is now a restaurant that serves beer and wine, and so he could not meet the 250-foot separation requirement at that location. So Mr. Lloyd worked hard to find a new location and in the same vicinity, and this location is what he has. This is what he came up with after having to scramble a little bit. But The subject property is at 2437 Old Fort Parkway, which is the Fifth Third Bank that is actually right in front of the same Kroger shopping center that he was set up at before. This is one of the out parcels of that development. And I'll show you the aerial photo now. You'll see here is the Fifth Third Bank. And they have a parking area up front along Old Fort Parkway, and they have kind of a secondary parking area here closer to the parking lot of the Kroger. One of the things that I will point out, and Mr. Halliburton will remember this, is that earlier this year or late in 2010, I can't remember exactly when, I think around February or January, Kroger had a new fuel center approved for this location here. And they are actually going to be building a underground detention area. This is actually the detention area for the Stone Trace Commons Shopping Center. They're going to take that detention underground and build the fuel center here in the current above ground detention area. I did make contact with the design engineer for that Kroger fuel center because obviously if Mr. Lloyd is proposing to put his tent right here, would not be able to meet that 200-foot separation requirement from the fuel pumps. And I did make contact with the design engineer for that fuel center, and he said that with the underground detention improvements that are going to have to be constructed, it will be well after July 4th before the fuel center is up and running. So that is a non-issue for this year anyway. Mr. Lloyd is requesting for the 4th of July selling season only, and as I mentioned, he wishes to go in this back parking area right here. You'll see he's looking to put a 40 by 60 tent in this area, which will take up about half the parking spaces in that area, take up about 10 parking spaces, and there are 18 parking spaces total. You'll notice that he did ask for a variance to the requirement that that a temporary vendor not displace more than 25% of the available parking on site for an existing business. One of the things in years past, when someone has asked for this variance, I've advertised a specific percentage, and there's really no way to know how many parking spaces will be taken up by the temporary vendor. So what I've done is just advertise for this as a blanket variance from that requirement. Mr. Lloyd said that this back parking area is seldom ever used. And I've been out there a couple of times, and in the times that I've been out there, I can confirm that to be true. Most of the parking occurs at the front of the site along Old Fort Parkway, and I'm not sure when, if ever, this back parking lot is actually used. Mr. Lloyd said that up until Saturday, July 2nd, July 4th this year is on a Monday. Up until Saturday, July 2nd. His customers and employees will be able to be contained, and if we could put that back up, please. Most of his customers and employees will be contained in the back area where the tent is, which, as I mentioned, is seldom used. Mr. Lloyd has contacted the bank itself. Of course, he had to get permission from the bank to actually make this application, but he contacted the local bank to see what their hours were for the 4th of July weekend. And they will be closing at 2 o'clock, I believe. 2 o'clock, Mr. Lloyd? 2 o'clock on Saturday, July 2nd, and will be closed Sunday, July 3rd, and Monday, July 4th. Mr. Lloyd anticipates that the only times where customer parking will actually spill outside of that little area will be on the afternoon and evening of Saturday, July 2nd, and on July 3rd and 4th, and that the entire rest of the time when the bank will actually be open, that little parking area back there will be sufficient for his operations. As I mentioned, this is the first time an application for a seasonal fireworks retailer has been submitted for this site. The The tent's hours of operation will be from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. with the exception of July 3rd and 4th, during which time the tent will be open from 7 a.m. until midnight. The site passed its initial codes and zoning inspections after the application was made. As I mentioned, the size of the proposed tent is 40 by 60. Mr. Lloyd will use a generator to provide electricity to the tent, and a portable toilet will also be brought in as well. As I mentioned, he meets the separation requirements from alcohol sales for on-premises consumption as well as fuel pumps. And there are also several fire hydrants that are directly adjacent to the subject property. If the board approves the special use permit, staff recommends the following conditions. Certification should be submitted that the tent is flame resistant or treated to be flame resistant. A fire extinguisher should be kept on site at all times. The city's fireworks ordinance should be posted on site. No fireworks are to be set off on site. All signage must comply with the city's sign ordinance. The site must pass an electrical safety inspection prior to opening for business. An electrical permit must be purchased from the Building and Codes Department in order to obtain this inspection. The tent must meet all minimum building setback requirements for the CH zoning district, and a tent permit must be obtained for the tent. And I'll just show you some pictures of the site. There is the front of the bank as it faces Old Fort Parkway, and you can see this is the parking area that is traditionally used by the customers and employees of the bank. Just some shots of the property across the street. You see O'Charlie's. Because the tent will be at the rear of the site, you will not violate the distance requirements to the O'Charlie's, which serves alcohol. That's the O'Reilly's right across the main drive into the Stone Trace Commons. This is looking back to the Kroger Shopping Center from the parking area where the tent will be. And this is looking back up to from the parking area where the tent will be back up to the bank building. And this is looking to the east. Waffle House is up here, and this is another bank here along Cason Lane. And finally, this is the parking area where the tent will be located. One condition that I did forget to mention that I discussed with Mr. Lloyd, I did forget to put it in the staff comments, is that the entrance into that back parking lot adjacent to the tent will need to be barricaded so that no one actually decides to try to pull into the tent. I don't know why they would, but better safe than sorry. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Lloyd is here if you have any questions for him.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, Mr. Lloyd, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Appreciate your time.
All right. And then we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion. And I guess, again, you're really socking it to us with two doubled up on each application. This is, I have two here as well. Well, I guess we'll first consider the special use permit request to operate the fireworks retailer in a commercial highway zone.
And the 7 listed conditions, as well as the one that I stated verbally, would apply to the special use permit and not the variance.
Chairman Rogers, I'll make a motion that we approve the special use permit subject to all staff comments. And
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll now consider the request for the requirement that the parking spaces displaced be not more than 25% of the total parking available.
I'll make a motion to approve with the comments of the staff.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Lloyd, the application has been granted. Move on to application Z11030 by Ms. Julie Smith for Absolute Fireworks, requesting special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment in a commercial highway zone. This again is for a seasonal fireworks retailer, and this is for property located at 131 through 133 Cason Lane. Again, the applicant is requesting a variance to the requirement that the parking spaces displaced by a temporary vendor on the site of an existing permanent business not total more than 25% of the total parking available on site. Mr. Blomley, if you'd review that one for us.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. This is the site that Ms. Smith has made application for the past 5 years, so I won't go over all the details because this is one that we've seen a number of times before. Her application is essentially identical in the years past. To my knowledge, we have not received any complaints about this particular location. And much like the last application, she's also requesting the parking variance, and she has done so for about the past 2 or 3 years. And one of the things that I will mention, and I don't know if this will be the case come July 4th, but it's a 2-tenant building. It's got the laundromat and used to be a tanning salon. The tanning salon is actually no longer there, and so it's got a vacant tenant space. Whether or not that tenant space will be occupied by July 4th, I don't know, but that will be because that vacant tenant space will be because that tenant space will be vacant. That's less demand for the actual parking on site. And as I mentioned, in years past with this, I've tried to specify a percentage variance, but I got to thinking about it, and it's about impossible to know exactly how much additional parking on top of the 25% will be taken up by customers and employees. So we're just asking for a blanket variance to that request, or to that requirement. And if the board approves the special use permit request, staff recommends the standard 7 conditions that I read aloud earlier. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And of course, we do need 2 separate motions. And Ms. Smith is here if you have any questions for her.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, Ms. Smith, anything you'd like to add to the application? All right, then at this time, we'll conduct a public. Any questions for Ms. Smith? At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion. And again, we've got 2 parts of it. We'll consider first the special use permit to operate the fireworks stand.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the special use permit subject to staff comments.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We'll now consider the request for the variance to the 25% total parking available.
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Ms. Smith, that application has been granted. We'll now move to, I think, another one of your applications requiring just a special use permit. This is application Z11031 by Ms. Julie Smith for Absolute Fireworks, requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment, a seasonal fireworks retailer, in a commercial local zone, and this is for property located at 3216 Memorial Boulevard. Mr. Blomley, if you'd review that for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. 3216 Memorial Boulevard. As you all know, this is an application this is a location that we've had several times before. As a matter of fact, I believe this is the 3rd time that Ms. Smith has made application for this location. This is the site of a former hotel site that burned down several years ago, and the property is currently vacant. The building has been completely demolished, but the parking lot remains, and Ms. Smith as she has done the last 2 years, is looking to set up in the parking lot of the former hotel site. This application, much like the last one, is identical to last year's. To my knowledge, we have had no complaints about the operations of this tent the last 2 years. One thing that I will mention is the gas station to the south. We have verified in years past that this tent will meet the minimum 200-foot separation from the gas pumps to the south. If the board approves this application, staff recommends the standard 7 conditions, with the 8th condition that a physical barricade must be erected along the eastern edge of the parking lot, as well as the northern side of the grass island in the middle of the site. You'll recall that the eastern edge of the parking lot, there's a little bit of a drop-off. The land slopes down where the hotel site used to be. And also there's a grass island in the middle of the site that has curb around 3 sides of it, but not all around one side of it. And we don't want anybody parking in that grass area. One thing I will mention in addition is the site did pass its preliminary zoning inspection after the application was made. It failed its preliminary property maintenance inspection because of tall weeds and grass. Ms. Smith was directed to mow the grass so that it could pass a property maintenance inspection and call our property maintenance inspector. He has been out sick, and I have not heard from him whether or not the site did pass, but Ms. Smith assured me that they were out there for about 4 or 5 hours on Friday, making the site look better. So I'd just like to add a 9th condition that the site must pass its property maintenance inspection. And I hope to hear word from our property maintenance inspector when he returns to the office. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Ms. Smith is here if you have any questions for her.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? Ms. Smith, anything you'd like to add to this one? No? Okay. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application subject to all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Smith, that application has been approved as well. And we'll now move on to our final application. It's a special use permit amendment request. This is application Z11032 by Ms. Cynthia Sherwin. She's requesting an amendment to a special use permit originally approved on August 25th, 2010, allowing a home occupation, which would be a hair salon, in a residential duplex zone. This is for property located at 811 North Church Street. The approved special use permit had called for the home occupation to be conducted from within the principal structure. The applicant wishes to amend the special use permit in order to conduct the home occupation from within a proposed accessory structure. Mr. Blomley, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. You'll recall that Ms. Sherwin was before the Board of Zoning Appeals in August of 2010 for a home-based hair salon. The board approved the request, and I have the minutes from that meeting as well as the staff comments from that August 2010 meeting as well for your reference. I'm going to show you the property for your reference. And I'm having a little hard time seeing as well. Not really. Okay. It is this property right here. Kind of wanted to get you a zoomed out view of the area. As you can see, it's primarily residential in nature. There are some other institutional uses in the area as well, including a daycare to the south, a church to the northeast, as well as a parking lot for that church, a couple doors to the north as well. There are a variety of residential uses as well in the subject area. You'll recall back in August 2010, Ms. Sherwin had a special use permit approved for a home-based hair salon. At the time, her plan was to build an addition onto the back of her home. There's already an addition on the back of her home that does not match the rest of the home. She was going to tear that addition down and build an addition including the salon and a sunroom on the back of her home. She decided to change her plans, and instead of doing that, to demolish the existing accessory structure at the end of her driveway and build a new accessory structure in its place and house the salon within the accessory structure as opposed to within an addition to the principal structure. When Ms. Sherwin approached staff about this, we advised her that was a significant enough change to require a application to the Board of Zoning Appeals to amend her special use permit so that it could be conducted out of the accessory structure as opposed to within the principal structure. Really the only other change to her request is the fact that the driveway will be a little bit different. And you see here is Ms. Sherwin's house here. This is the addition onto the back of the house that she was going to tear down and then build out for her salon. Instead, she's going to tear down this existing accessory structure, which, according to her measurements, does not meet the minimum 5-foot side setback requirement. She's going to build a new accessory structure in its place, 16 by 28, that will meet the minimum 5-foot side setback requirement for accessory structures. In addition, she's planning on paving her driveway about 80 feet deep, and that 80 feet deep will meet the minimum requirements for off-street parking for a single-family residence. There's required to be a minimum of 4 parking spaces for a single-family residence. Right now, the driveway is single-car width, and it only goes to about right here. It's a gravel driveway. But she's planning on extending that all the way back in order to accommodate 4 cars. It'll be single-car width. Before in her previous application, it was going to be single-car width alongside of the house, and it was going to flare out. She feels that she does not need to pave all the way up to the house here and make it wider at the back, simply because she doesn't feel that there will be the demand for parking in order to do that, and I don't think she wants to asphalt in that much of her yard. But that 4 spaces will meet the minimum requirements for a single-family residence. This is a front elevation or a front sketch of the proposed accessory building. It will have a pitched roof, and it will also have siding on the outside of it, but it will not be vinyl siding. She's also provided a floor plan. As you can see, there'll be an open area here with a chair, shampoo station here. The color bar, there'll be another sink over here, and that will be actually where she mixes the hair color. And then there will be a full bathroom right here. Now, back in 2010, the request was approved subject to the following conditions. That building permits must be obtained for the demolition of the existing laundry room and the construction of the salon/porch addition. The applicant shall not begin operating out of the business until operation of the business until a certificate of occupancy has been issued by the Building and Codes Department. Number 2, there shall be no overlapping appointments. Number 3, all appointments shall end no later than 7 p.m. And number 4, there should be a maximum of 5 appointments per business day, which were all things that she had volunteered to do in her application. Those were kind of codifying those parts of her application. None of that will change. Ms. Sherwin still intends to operate in the same manner, just in a different location on her property. She will still see only a maximum of 5 clients per day. There will be no overlapping appointments, so there will just be a maximum of 1 client there at a time. And the hours of operation will be from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. One of the things that's different with it being in the accessory structure is that it cannot take up more than 500 square feet if located completely within an accessory structure, and the entire size of this accessory structure will be 448 square feet. So it will not exceed that maximum size requirements. And the recommended conditions of approval are the same as from her 2010 approval, with the exception that I've modified number 1 to say that required permits for the proposed work, including a demolition permit, if necessary, must be obtained from the Building and Codes Department. In addition, the applicant shall not begin operation of the business until a certificate of occupancy has been issued by the Building and Codes Department. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Ms. Sherwin is here if you have any questions for her.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? So this application, everything will stay the same as the original special use permit, except for the fact that we're moving it from inside the house to an accessory structure outside the house. Hours of operation stay the same. The number of, I know employees, there's not going to be any, and signage, there's not going to be any. All that remains the same as from the original application.
That's correct. The two key changes are the driveway will not be flared out at the end, and it will be moved from the principal structure into a new accessory structure.
In square footage wise, we were talking, in the last one, we were talking about 448 square feet.
I think the new one is 448 square feet. The old one was 392 square feet.
I'm sorry, okay.
So it's about 50 square feet
50
larger.
square feet, okay. And go ahead.
I was just going to mention that it's very possible, and she has mentioned that she may use some of that new accessory structure for typical household storage as well. It may not be that the entire accessory structure is actually used as a part of her home-based business.
That's completely gone out of my head. Yeah, I don't know. I'll think about it. I'll think of it. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Blomley?
Now, I do have some photographs if you'd like to see them.
Okay. Buy some time for me to think about my question.
Yeah, I'm trying to buy you some time, Chairman.
Yeah.
All right, this is the front of the home. As you can see, here's the existing gravel drive, which is proposed to be paved.
Yeah, I've thought about my question now.
Well, you got it fresh on your mind.
Right. Have there been any? She hadn't done any kind of operation inside the house at this point, has she?
No. She, I believe that it was going to be a pretty massive project to demolish that existing addition and then build the new addition. And I think that she just decided to go away from that because of the scale of that addition.
Okay. And the minutes reflect that there was nobody that spoke at the last meeting.
I don't recall specifically, but I don't recollect anybody speaking at the meeting.
If there was any opposition at that time from neighbors, and we haven't had our public hearing yet, but considering the fact that she's the only one here, I don't think there's going to be any opposition today.
Yeah, I don't recollect
haven't gotten
anybody.
Any calls on this, have you?
I have not.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Sure. Here's Ms. Sherwin's driveway here. Here's I believe that's the Butler house next door. Ms. Butler has actually submitted a letter in support of Ms. Sherwin's application. So the next door neighbor who will be most affected, the hair salon will be closest in proximity to this neighbor to the south. She has actually written a letter in support of Ms. Sherwin. And this is looking down the driveway to that existing accessory structure that will be demolished. And this is that accessory structure. this is just kind of a view from where the salon will be over to Ms. Butler's house to the south. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Longley. Ms. Sherwin, anything you'd like to add to your application? Okay. All right, then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application? And seeing no one, literally no one, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the application subject to the conditions set by the staff.
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Sherwin, that application has been granted, and thank you. All right, we now move on to staff reports and other business.
I have none.
All right. The board have any other business? If not, then we're adjourned.